Hey, what's going on, guys? We're here today to talk about, as usual, our discussion guide videos. This time we're going to be going over Metagross. So hopefully you guys enjoy. If you do, of course, leave a like below, subscribe if you're new, and with that said, let's just get right into it. So first things first, of course, Metagross, I do want to mention, has definitely gotten a lot worse this generation in comparison to DPP OU. So I do not think it will actually be one of the best Pokemon in the meta like it was last time. Metagross was really only outclassed by Jirachi for what it could do, to be honest, and even still it had some merits over Jirachi, such as Pursuit Trapping, so that definitely already played in Metagross's favor. However, this generation has lost Pursuit, not only this, but it's lost Toxic as well, which is a whole other thing for Fat Metagross sets, or just for lead Metagrosses. But if that was not enough, unlike in DPP OU, this is now going to be weak to Psychic, to Dark, and to Ghost types. Because before, because of the Steel Psychic typing, it was actually neutral, which that mostly came from the fact that Steel resisted these types until Generation 6. However, because of this will actually be hurting Metagross pretty significantly when some of the Pokemon that we're going to be seeing in OU are really good Ghosts and Dark types, things like Weavile, Gengar, etc. So with that in mind, I do actually think this Pokemon will no longer be a really good meta definer. However, I did still think it was a very interesting Pokemon to talk about, because I do still think it actually will be a good one. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video, and with that said, let's just get right into it. So the first things I want to do is I want to go over two different lead Metagrosses. Now, these are two different leads. They play very differently. One is for the long term, this being a Stealth Rock leftover set with Stealth Rock, Meteor Mash, Earthquake, and Bullet Punch. Because you don't have Toxic anymore, you do kind of need to substitute this out. So I opted for Bullet Punch. I thought this could be pretty useful for things like Lotties, for example, especially if they are Scarf Lotties and you really just need to hit them in your weekend. It's also great for things like Gengar if you need to just pick it off, so that way then it doesn't threaten you out. Or for Weavile too, this is phenomenal for that actually, so it doesn't knock you off. Just want max attack, max HP. There's really not a lot you need investment-wise. However, another option, of course, is to go and hit the 244 mark with your speed, which is 176 Jolly. This way then you can outpace things like Tyranitar, and as well you can also outpace Not Scarf and Magnezone too, which is great because Magnezone has Magnet Pull. So this does definitely help you on that regard. So overall, I do think this Metagross is pretty good. In terms of how you play it, this basically would just be a long game version of the next set we're going to go over. And you'll see why in a second, why that is named Short Game Lead. But basically though, this is really just meant to be a defensive steal. It's just bulky while also still applying offensive pressure to your opponents. Especially with the fact that there will be a few fairy types in this game. This could be a really good partner for dragons like Garchomp, for example, or Dragonite and Ments. Especially Garchomp in my opinion. But regardless though, I think that, yeah, this Metagross set, if I was to pick a lead, I would personally prefer this one. However, we do have the of course, the Boom, aka the short game lead, which I opted for Rossberry on this. This initially did have Lumberry in the suggested set. However, I think really you're not going to care about T-Wave if your goal is to get Rocks up and then Boom. So I felt like that with this set, it was best to go with Rost because this specifically targets Will-O-Wisp. And that way then you can make sure you can explode while making sure you are only having your status popped by burn. So I thought that was really helpful personally. However, Lum is just as good in my opinion. You could even make a case that it's better. There's also option for things like Sash as well, since this will be a lead. There's a lot of different options for this. But this set changes out Bullet Punch for Explosion because you're not meant to keep this around if you're going to go for the Boom lead. So I felt like Bullet Punch as that option was the better route. You could also probably go with the cost up set as well if you really wanted. However, I think that's a bit more unreliable, but you could definitely do that for sure. We went with max speed on this one, mostly just to try and go after other base 70 that might run speed. This would be things like maybe Jolly Max Speed Metagross for whatever reason, which Band could definitely do that to be fair. So you do want to keep an eye out on that. I think ultimately this set definitely pales in comparison to the long game lead. However, there are definitely certain builds, like maybe HO builds for example, that are going to benefit from a Boom Metagross. But personally, I think of all the sets on here, this is probably the second weakest set. I would think that the next set afterwards would be personally the one I would say is the weakest in this metagame, and I'll get into that in a bit. But I think these are the set and the third set on our discussion today are probably the weakest two in my opinion. Shockingly enough, I mean, you guys can obviously see the set names, but regardless though, yeah. I do think it's still not a bad option though. As I said, this will fit really well on HO builds, but yeah, just not doing what a Steel type really should be doing. And you can probably justify it a lot more in something like the Landers, for example, when it's your ground type. And at the very least, there are some matchups you're probably not going to fight a Pokemon that you're going to really want a ground type for. However, in this sort of format, with how few steals there are, you're probably going to really want to steal around for your game. So that way then you can really enable your dragons. With that said, next set on our list today is the Agility Metagross. Now, I'd probably put this above the short game lead personally, but Agility Metagross I think will have a lot harder of a time without Ice Punch in this metagame, specifically being with how many dragons are, things like Intimidate Ments, which to be fair, actually there's Clear Bodies, maybe not Intimidate Ments, but Ments in general, things like Dragonite as well, or obviously Garchomp will be a pretty big nuisance for this, especially Garchomp actually, whereas Agility before could have probably been made to work around that by going for Ice Punch. So it's a bit unfortunate. This set creeps base 100s, I believe, at +2, including like base 100 Scarfers. Though you could obviously throw a bit more into speed to creep Garchomp because now that is an actual Pokemon in the metagame, which it was not when the set was made. This is literally just the old Agility set, but I just swapped it out. One of the big things that I think will really hurt this set is the fact that I think that Steals will be so common, and especially Steals like Skarmory will be so common in this metagame. And the set really gets pretty walled by Skarmory if you look at it. So I think it already is going to hurt it. You could probably swap out Zen for Trick and then go with Iron Ball if you wanted, which, I mean, that's pretty much the Iron Ball set that we have later, but I'll get into that in a bit. But I do think that ultimately this sort of set will just have too much going on, and you really do need the damage output as well if you're going to go with an Agility set, in my opinion. I think it's going to be a fine set, but I just think it'll be a really hard one to pull off is all. It's going to be a lot harder than it would have been in comparison to last gen. But, I mean, Agility Metagross still does have a pretty good stat line, and an offensive steal is never really a bad thing in this format. The fact that it's going to be a really good Dragon Resist, it has natural bulk as well, and it's a good Fairy Killer. It really does just sort of have the stars align for it. Not only this, but it's going to naturally creep things like Magnezone and T-Tar, which is really helpful because T-Tar is going to be very, very common, I'm certain of. And I think that Magnezone will have a pretty good place because of how many dragons I think will be used, especially things like Latios and Garchomp. So the fact that this is a steal that can actually beat Magnezone, I think that's pretty good in its favor. Though I'm not going to act like there aren't other steals that can do that. Things like Keytron are really good at that. Same as Scizor, even if it has superpower, is really good at that. Or at the very least, if you just creep Magnezone, you can pivot around it easily. So I'm not going to act like this is the only steal that could do that, but it is definitely helpful in its case for sure, because there are a lot of steals that do kind of just lose to it. Overall, though, I think Agility Metagross will probably struggle a bit. I think that the next two sets are for sure better, and they're probably the two sets I think will have the best presence. The first one being Banded Metagross. Now, Banded Metagross could ultimately just be Scarfed, however, I do think a Banded Metagross will have a very good place in this metagame. We have 244 speed. This speed should be creeping T-Star perfectly. We have Meteor Mash, Earthquake, Bullet Punch, and Zen Headbutt. With the max attack, I felt like this was very important. Initially, the spread was, I think, max speed and then Adamant Nature. However, you actually get crept by Timid Magnezone by exactly 1 point, and I didn't really think that was worth it. Nor did I think it was worth it to get trapped, to get outpaced by T-Tar, especially with his Jolly T-Tar. Which, while I'm not sure if it will necessarily be run, it helps with any sort of max speed Adamant Metagrosses. It helps with Magnezones. So I don't think it's the worst spring in the world. It also creeps like low speed Rachi going Jolly, for example. So I think there's a lot of merit to it. However, I don't know if it's going to be the commonplace or not. Regardless, though, I do think this Metagross set right here is pretty helpful. In terms of the offensive pressure it would apply, the fact that it is a Steel Psychic type, actually it's pretty covered in this metagame. There were a lot of fighting types that were really running wild in DPP OU. On top of the fact as well, again, for the Dragon Resist, great check to things like Lottie while still applying a lot of offensive pressure, which not all sets did before. Besides like Agility, you weren't really getting that. And because of the fact that you just weren't boosting Metagross. So while 135 is a high base, you're just not going to get that if you're not boosting it. In terms of Bullet Punch, it's a really useful priority here, just helping because of the fact that you are a slower Pokemon in this metagame. Even with all the Pokemon missing, base 70 is still a very slow speed tier. It's probably like what base 90 would have been in Sword and Shield OU, and even then that didn't have the full dex. Probably be like what base 95 was in Ultra Sun and Moon OU, if that's a better comparison. But that's basically how 70 is probably going to function here. It's just going to be an okay speed tier at best, but it is still not bad by any sense. In terms of what Metagross is really going to do with this set, I think it's just going to be a really good breaker. You could totally use this on Webs teams and also against other Webs teams too, because the fact that you're not going to be affected by Webs. So I think especially that could be very useful for sure. So I do think Metagross definitely has a place as an offensive breaker in this tier for sure, especially the fact that it's going to have Clear Body, and that'll get around things like Bulky, Intimidate, Ments, for example. So I do think this will be a pretty decent Pokemon personally. If I had to pick a best set for Metagross, I would personally put my money on this one so far. Especially with the lack of Toxic, I don't think the bulky sets are going to do as well anymore, because you kind of do need to run it with T-Spikes now to really get that sort of Toxic. So I do think that this will personally probably be the best Metagross set now. Especially the fact that it's a lot more offensively based than something like a Jirachi, so it can hold that over Rachi, whereas Rachi can then lean towards the bulkier variants, which it would do better at just because of the better natural Spidef at least, and HP as well. So yeah, I do think this Metagross will probably be the best one though, but we'll have to see. Finally though, I have a Metagross here that I actually did find on Smogon, and I really liked it, to be honest. I thought this was a really cool set, and especially the fact that I think Skarmory and Rotoms will both be such good Pokemon in this metagame. I think that this trick set could actually be pretty good. It's Trick, Earthquake, Meteor Mash, and Stealth Rock. Now, you might be wondering what 20 speed on Metagross is for. I 100% wondered it too, and I almost took it all out. However, apparently with 20 speed, you're actually perfectly able to creep base 115s, which is phenomenal because you can get Earthquakes off in things like Starmie, for example, or Raikou, more importantly. So I do think it already does play in the merit of the speed creep. On top of this as well, that means if you trick an Iron Ball into something like maybe like, let's say a Garchomp and you Meteor Mash to kill it, you're able to actually outpace it now, which is pretty cool if it's not a Scarf set. In terms of the fourth move, that's Rocks right now, but you can honestly make that something like, for example, Zen Headbutt if you felt like. There's a lot of different moves. Obviously, it doesn't get all of them. Like, for example, it does lack Ice Punch, which is very unfortunate. But even still, just Zen Headbutt's a really good option. Bullet Punch is still cool because you're not going to actually outpace Weavile with the spread. However, if you did feel like going with the creeping Weavile route, you could totally just go to, I want to say it's, let's see, so 383. You're going to want to go to, oh my god, I'm trying to do head math. I can't think of it right now. I think it's 187. 187, I think, is what you want to go with. Yeah, that would be the creep. 187 should be the creep. It's either that or like, point is you want to go up a little bit. Yeah, it should be 187. But yeah, so that would basically creep Weavile for you, which isn't really much more to go, to be fair. I'm actually gonna double check my math here because I feel like that I am wrong. Yeah, 192 actually. I was wrong. I still got a lot to go for, to be fair. Like, if we were to do that live right here, that's 192 HP EVs, which, honestly, this could still be really worth it, to be fair. That would avoid knockoff, and especially with the fact that Weavile does, I believe, still get knockoff. No, it gets Night Slash. You're still avoiding Night Slash, at least if nothing else. So I do think that that at least does provide some semblance of reasoning to using this speed group instead. It's an alternate version, same purpose, really just meant to be faster. Though, to be fair, I think that Weavile will probably get outclassed as a Dark type by T-Tar just because it can actually reliably switch it in Lotties, as well as the fact that you're just bulkier and the fact that you can still creep a set like this with T-Tar pretty easily. And also the fact that T-Tar is just an obnoxious Pokemon for this meta. It really does just kind of hit everything perfectly on the head. So I do think that personally would be why I would use it, but Weavile obviously outpacing non-Scarf Lotties as well as things like Gengar if it's not Scarf, so there is merit for it, and if you want to be prepared for it, just run this set. So with that said, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, leave a like below, subscribe if you're new, and we will see you guys in tomorrow's video. Until then, peace out, guys.